What if Halloween night isn't just about costumes and candy, but a gateway to something far more terrifying? Have you ever felt an unshakable sense of dread while trick-or-treating, or stumbled upon a story that sent chills down your spine? And what if those seemingly innocent scarecrows standing silently in fields are more than just decorations? What if they watch and wait for the right moment to reveal their true purpose? Tonight, we're diving into true Halloween horror stories that reveal the dark side of this festive night. Get ready for tales that will make you rethink every Halloween and question what might be lurking just beyond the flickering streetlights. But before we start, I just want to give a huge shout out to all of you. Your support is the heartbeat of this channel, and I'm beyond grateful for this incredible community. If you are enjoying our content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a spine-tingling upload. And if you want to support us and help us grow, there are a few simple ways you can contribute. Sharing the videos, leaving a comment, or even checking out our support options on Patreon or Ko-Fi would be greatly appreciated. Your support makes a huge difference and helps us keep bringing you top-notch content. Thank you again for being a part of this journey with me. And now, let's dive into the darkness together. Let me tell you about the Halloween I spent at my grandmother's old farmhouse. It had been years since I'd visited, but as I drove through those winding back roads, nostalgia washed over me. The fields were golden under the autumn sun, the air crisp with the promise of the season. I remembered the joy of picking pumpkins and the thrill of carving them into jack-o'-lanterns, all the while surrounded by the vibrant colors of fall. One of the highlights of my childhood was Grandma's scarecrow. It was a local landmark. This massive figure that stood at the edge of the cornfield, dressed in ragged clothes, with a crooked burlap face that seemed to hold secrets of its own. I always thought it looked quirky and charming, a staple of our Halloween celebrations. As I drove closer to the farmhouse, I couldn't wait to see how Grandma had decorated it this year. When I arrived, the house felt just as I remembered. Cozy, filled with the scent of fresh-baked pumpkin bread and spices wafting through the air. After exchanging warm hugs and catching up with my grandmother, I finally stepped outside to check on the scarecrow. My excitement faded as a chill ran down my spine. It looked different. The burlap face was stitched unevenly, the clothes hung limply, and its eyes seemed darker, almost as if they were watching me. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the unease. After all, it had been years. Maybe I was just imagining things. That night, I set about carving pumpkins and hanging twinkling lights around the yard. Every time I glanced out the window, I couldn't help but notice the scarecrow. To my shock, it was now facing the house. Its head tilted slightly, giving it an almost sentient quality. I told myself it was just the angle, but the sensation of being watched was undeniable, growing stronger with every passing moment. As Halloween drew closer, odd occurrences began to unsettle me. I'd find my carefully arranged pumpkins smashed and my decorations rearranged overnight. At first, I brushed it off as local kids playing pranks, but my gut told me otherwise. It felt like something was off, as if the air around me thickened with a sinister presence. On Halloween night, I decided to take a walk through the fields to clear my mind. The full moon bathed everything in a silver glow, casting eerie shadows that danced along the path. As I walked, I savored the sounds of crunching leaves underfoot, but the silence of the cornfield felt oppressive. Suddenly, I heard it, a soft rustling that didn't match the wind. I turned and saw the scarecrow, standing much closer than before, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, as if it were waiting for me. Panic gripped me, and I rushed back to the house, locking the door behind me. I tried to shake off the feeling of dread as I prepared for trick-or-treaters, but every time I glanced out the window, the scarecrow was still there, looming ominously. Then, to my horror, I realized it had disappeared. My heart raced. I searched the yard frantically, but there was no sign of it. Just as I was about to dismiss my fear as irrational, I heard a low, raspy whisper floating from the cornfield. "Help me." My blood ran cold. I convinced myself it was just the wind, but the icy grip of fear told me otherwise. Grabbing my phone to call for help, I realized there was no signal. Just as I turned around, the front door creaked open slowly. My breath caught in my throat as a tall figure emerged from the darkness, cloaked in ragged clothes, resembling the scarecrow I'd known. I froze, terror gripping me. The burlap face was animated now, with hollow eyes that seemed to reach deep into my soul. "You shouldn't have come back," it rasped, a voice that chilled me to the bone. Desperate, I bolted upstairs, locking myself in a bedroom. The whispers intensified, now a chaotic chorus calling my name. "Emily, help me. Come outside." Trapped, I clutched my phone like a lifeline, hoping for a miracle. Then came a loud thump on the door, and the whispers turned into frantic pleas. "Let me out!" I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing for the nightmare to end. When I finally opened my eyes, the room was empty. My heart raced as I glanced out the window once more. There it stood, the scarecrow, now right in the yard, facing me with that grotesque stitched grin stretching across its burlap face. I felt paralyzed by fear, unable to look away. Suddenly, the whispers morphed into a single voice, clear and desperate. "You must help me." It seemed to reverberate inside my head. I stumbled backward, trying to process what was happening. Was it the spirit of someone trapped? Or was it simply the scarecrow's malevolence taking shape? With trembling hands, I approached the window again, and the figure seemed to lean closer as if trying to communicate. "You don't belong here," it whispered, its voice softer now but still tinged with that chilling edge. "You must leave before it's too late." In that moment, clarity struck me. I remembered the stories Grandma used to tell about the scarecrow, how it was said to be a vessel for spirits lost in the fields, cursed to protect the harvest. I realized I had inadvertently awakened something dark by returning. I rushed to grab my things, my heart racing as I prepared to flee. The whispers escalated into a frantic cacophony, pleading for release, echoing in my mind. I made it downstairs and dashed to the front door, throwing it open. The night air hit me like a wall, cold and heavy with dread. As I ran toward my car, I glanced back one last time. The scarecrow stood still, its hollow eyes locked onto mine. In that moment, I could have sworn it smiled. A knowing grin that promised it would be waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to stumble into its domain. I sped away, the farmhouse disappearing in my rearview mirror. But the echoes of that night would haunt me forever. In that small rural town, the scarecrow claimed another victim, patiently waiting for Halloween to rise again, hungry for fear and eager for its next unwitting guest. Halloween had always been a cherished time in our quiet neighborhood. Each year, children donned colorful costumes, filling the streets with laughter and joy. It was a magical night for families to gather and embrace the spooky spirit of the season. Little did I realize that one particular Halloween would become an unforgettable and haunting memory. The evening started perfectly. Decorations adorned every house, the candy bowl brimmed with treats, and our porch light shone invitingly. My wife and I delighted in watching the children's faces light up as they received their goodies. We cherished the sense of community that Halloween fostered, and it was a tradition we looked forward to every year. As dusk fell, the first wave of trick-or-treaters arrived, dressed as everything from witches to superheroes. We greeted each child with smiles, and they left with bags filled with candy and wide grins. But as the night deepened, a sudden chill settled in, accompanied by an eerie silence that enveloped our street. We exchanged puzzled glances, sensing that something was amiss. The usual excitement had vanished, replaced by an unsettling heaviness. While we stood on our porch, the light flickered ominously, but I dismissed it as a minor electrical issue and continued handing out candy to the few remaining trick-or-treaters. Still, a feeling of unease nagged at me. Just as I was about to step inside, a figure emerged from the shadows. It appeared to be a child, but the costume was peculiar. A tattered hooded cloak that obscured their face completely. The only feature visible were a pair of unnaturally bright eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. The child stood still, as if waiting for something. My unease deepened, but I didn't want to be impolite. I offered a piece of candy, but the figure made no move to take it. Instead, it extended a bony hand, palm up, as if expecting something more. I exchanged a bewildered glance with my wife, unsure of how to respond. Finally, I placed a few extra pieces of candy in the child's hand. As the child closed their fingers around the candy, I felt a sudden chill, a touch so cold it felt like ice. Without saying a word, the figure turned and melted back into the darkness, disappearing into the night. My wife and I shared incredulous looks. It had been the strangest encounter we'd ever had on Halloween. Trying to shake off the unsettling experience, we returned inside, attempting to enjoy the rest of the evening. However, the feeling of dread lingered, and I found myself glancing out the window, half expecting to see those eerie eyes staring back at me from the shadows. As the hours passed, my curiosity got the better of me. I decided to investigate. Stepping out into the cool night air, I followed the path that the strange trick-or-treater had taken, my heart racing. I ventured deeper into the neighborhood, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The streets were eerily silent, as if the world held its breath. Soon, I found myself at the edge of the woods bordering our neighborhood. The sensation of being watched intensified, and I aimed my flashlight into the dense trees. Among the twisted branches, I saw them. Those piercing eyes glowing in the dark. My breath caught in my throat as the figure transformed from its childlike appearance into something monstrous, a hulking shadow looming in the trees, its gaze fixed on me with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. Unable to look away, I watched as the figure slowly extended a long skeletal arm toward me, beckoning with fingers curled in a silent invitation. Panic surged through me, and I turned to run, stumbling through the dark woods, my heart racing. When I reached the safety of our neighborhood, I dared to glance back one last time. The figure had vanished, its eyes no longer watching me from the shadows. I hurried back to our home, where my wife stood anxiously at the door. I tried to explain what I had seen, but my words came out fragmented and shaky. She held me close, attempting to soothe my fears, assuring me it was just my imagination. But deep down, I knew something had lurked in the darkness that night, something that had descended upon our quiet neighborhood. Whether it was a restless spirit or something more sinister, I couldn't say. All I knew was that the memory of those glowing eyes would haunt my dreams for years, a chilling reminder that on Halloween, the line between reality and the supernatural can blur into something far more terrifying. It was Halloween night, and our farmhouse was alive with excitement. I could smell Mia's cooking wafting through the air. She was making her famous roasted chicken, and it made my mouth water. Outside, my little brother Jake was playing with his friend Liam, their laughter ringing out as they carelessly knocked over some Halloween decorations. "Don't worry, Aunt Lisa. Mom said we could smash these pumpkins," Jake yelled, brandishing a toy axe with a mischievous grin. "Just don't wreck everything, okay?" I chuckled back, shaking my head at their antics. Then I noticed Ethan, our caretaker. He was dressed in an old flannel shirt and jeans, a slight frown on his face as he lugged a large pumpkin toward the edge of the property. "Hey, Ethan, what are you up to with that pumpkin?" I asked, curiosity piqued. He paused, a glimmer of mischief in his eyes. "I'm taking it to the old cemetery in the woods. Gotta put up a new scarecrow." "A scarecrow? In a graveyard? Why on earth?" I replied, raising an eyebrow in disbelief. "To keep the spirits from waking up and bothering us," he said, his tone playful, yet there was an underlying seriousness that sent a shiver down my spine. "Come on, that's just silly," I laughed, though a part of me felt unsettled. Jake and Liam's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Can we go with you?" they chimed in unison. "Sure, but stick close," Ethan replied, leading the way. As we walked toward the edge of the woods, I couldn't shake an odd chill in the air. It felt thicker than it should for a typical Halloween night. "So why do you really need a scarecrow in a graveyard?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood. Ethan's expression shifted. It's a way to honor those who have passed. They've done so much for us. His words hung heavy in the air, and I tried to brush off the unease that crept over me. Right, sure, I said, forcing a smile. When we finally reached the cemetery, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The air felt charged, as if the world around us was holding its breath. Ethan began setting up the scarecrow, which already had a body made from old clothes, but the pumpkin head wasn't in place yet. "Stay back a bit, kids," he instructed, his tone suddenly serious. "It can get a little spooky after dark." I exchanged uneasy glances with Jake and Liam, both of whom looked just as bewildered as I felt. "This is getting weird," I whispered. Just then, Ethan paused and squinted into the trees. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice low. "What? Hear what?" I replied, suddenly on edge. He hesitated, glancing around as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. I remembered stories about this place, whispers of ghosts and strange happenings that sent shivers down my spine. "Let's head back," I suggested, a sense of urgency creeping into my voice. But just as we turned, I caught a flicker of movement in the shadows beyond the trees. A figure, barely visible, watching us. "Did you see that?" I whispered urgently, my heart racing. "What? Where?" Jake asked, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. I pointed into the darkness, but the figure was gone. Ethan noticed too, his face tightening. "We should definitely go," he said, glancing nervously into the woods. We hurried back toward the farmhouse, the laughter and warmth of home drawing us in. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking behind us, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Once inside, I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. Mia was busy preparing dinner, and the chatter of family filled the room. Yet, as I glanced out the window, I half expected to see those watchful eyes staring back at me from the darkness. As the evening wore on and the trick-or-treaters came and went, the unease lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever Ethan was hiding went beyond just a scarecrow. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I kept replaying the events in my mind. What was the real purpose of that scarecrow? And why did Ethan seem so intent on keeping us away from the truth? I closed my eyes, trying to push the unsettling thoughts away, but sleep eluded me. The flickering candlelight from my bedside lamp cast eerie shadows on the walls, and I felt a cold breeze drift through the room. What if the stories were true? What if the graveyard was more than just a resting place? My heart raced as I realized that on Halloween, the line between the living and the dead could easily blur. And as the clock struck midnight, I couldn't help but wonder if the spirits had truly awakened. This memory from my childhood always sends chills down my spine. I was around 7 or 8 years old, and it was Halloween night. Usually, my mom would take my younger brother and me trick-or-treating, but that year was different. After school, she dropped me off at my friend Ben's house, where he and our friend Max were already waiting. Ben and Max were both a year older, and I looked up to them, excited to join their adventures. Ben had a complicated home life that I never fully understood. His older sister Claire was often around, but she seemed detached, usually more interested in her phone than anything we were doing. Their house always had a peculiar smell, a mix of burnt popcorn and something I couldn't quite place. It was evident that their family dynamics were different, but I never thought much of it at the time. After my mom left, we donned our costumes, Ben as a vampire, Max as a ghost, and I was a cowboy. We filled our pillowcases with candy, and even though we were technically unsupervised, I felt a thrill of independence. We set out into the neighborhood, our excitement palpable as we rang doorbells and shouted, "Trick or treat!" The early evening was lively, and we collected candy from houses decorated with cobwebs and jack-o'-lanterns. However, as the night deepened, the streets began to empty. We ventured further from Ben's house, wanting to maximize our haul. We found ourselves on a quiet block, knocking on doors and receiving fewer responses. That's when we noticed a man in a dark coat pushing a stroller. He walked slowly, seemingly scanning the area. At first, I thought he might be another dad out with his child, but there was something unsettling about the way he moved. As we continued, the man got closer, humming a tune under his breath. He stopped near us and asked, "How's the trick-or-treating going, boys?" We replied in unison, "Good." "It's pretty late," he said, "but I have some extra candy I can share with you." Ben and I exchanged glances, excitement sparking in our eyes. The man smiled, and it felt oddly inviting. "I didn't get to give much away tonight because my daughter fell asleep in the stroller. She's right here, but I don't want to wake her." I peered at the stroller, curious but unable to see inside. "Just up this way," he gestured ahead. We started walking behind him, the street growing quieter by the minute. The man began asking us questions about school and where we lived. I let Ben answer most of them, feeling a mix of admiration and apprehension. As we walked, he would lean down to the stroller and speak softly, as if comforting a sleeping child. We finally arrived at his house, which loomed larger in the dim light. He pushed the stroller inside and then gestured for us to follow. Ben led the way, and I hesitated at the door. "Can we leave it open?" I asked, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "Of course," he replied, his smile still wide. He moved to retrieve the candy bags from another room, leaving us standing in the living room with the stroller just a few feet away. That's when I noticed Ben nudging me, a look of alarm on his face. He whispered, "Let's go." Suddenly, he turned and ran for the door. I was startled, but I followed, our pillowcases weighing us down. As we burst outside, I heard a woman's voice calling to us. It was a neighbor from a few houses down, rushing toward us. "Do you know that man?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "Yeah, he offered us candy, but he had a fake baby in the stroller," Ben blurted out, his voice trembling. The woman's face went pale. "That man doesn't have a child. I saw him earlier, and he was alone." My heart raced. The woman quickly led us to her car and drove us home. She went inside to talk to my mom, who looked frantic when she saw us. I recounted the night's events, and my mom's expression shifted from relief to horror. Afterward, she sent me to my room while she and my dad called the police. I learned later that they wanted to keep me safe from any more trauma. My mom didn't allow me to visit Ben anymore, and I could tell she had a serious talk with Claire about the incident. I still saw Ben at school occasionally, but our friendship changed forever. The innocence of childhood Halloween adventures was gone, replaced by a lingering sense of unease. Even years later, I find myself glancing at strollers when I see them, a reminder of that chilling night when a seemingly innocent offer of candy turned into something far more sinister. If you've experienced a terrifying event or have a horror story to tell, we at AG Horrors want to hear from you. Share your experiences with us, and let's uncover the mysteries hiding in the shadows together. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more spine-chilling stories like this one.